What's up, traders? I'm Mark Sebastian, your only option, and this is the Trader's Edge. I'm going to be covering today the economic events that matter for this week, the 5 stocks I'm watching, and I'm going to share with you a couple of levels that are key in both SPX and the Qs, and then we'll close with a little ditty about the VIX. All right, so with that, let's dig in. Here we are, and let's start with the economic reports. We got 2 biggies for this week. CPI and the Federal Reserve are both on the 12th. That is a big deal. CPI in the morning, that is going to move markets. And then the Federal Reserve, I think they're going to move markets as well. We had this crazy hopium build up again that the Fed was going to cut rates in June or July. It is not happening. Anytime you see, and here, let's start with bonds. Anytime you see a big bid in TLT, like the one we just got, until we actually see a reduction in real inflation, it's a good short. If it gets above the 100-day moving average, that's been a really nice opportunity to take the other side of the trade. Look at the way TLT just crashed. IEF, which is the 10-year bond, took it 7 to 10, took it even worse. It's now sitting at the 21-day, probably going to the 50. I think both of these make for an interesting short play. Now, let's get to SPX. SPX is booming higher. We closed the week just off a new all-time high. We hit the new all-time high on the 5th. But after the 5th, we kind of floundered about. Why? NVIDIA, Federal Reserve. All right, and I'll get to NVIDIA in a second, and then we're going to come back to SPX. So I want to kind of look at the Qs, kind of the same story. And the one thing that has me a little worried is the Dow Jones did not participate in the rally the same way that the S&P and the Qs did. Tells me how narrow this rally is. Another way of looking at it would be to look at like RSP, which actually did not really have a great week. It ended the week down. So that tells you that this rally in the S&P and the Qs is really coming from only a small sliver of the names. So let's get to my stocks to watch. I want to start with AMC. We all know about the Roaring Kitty event on Friday. AMC kind of also ran along with GameStop. I got to tell you, I watched the Roaring Kitty event for part of it, and I was expecting some real analysis. Instead, it was kind of a waste of my time. I'm sure he's a nice gentleman. I'm sure he's smart, but the way he presented, the way he kind of laid out his thesis to me was not very concrete. And I think that's part of the reason why on top of the earnings, GameStop early released earnings on Friday. On top of that, I think that the lack of any real clarity out of Keith Gill is why the stock got pummeled so hard. Next up on my watch list, NVIDIA. All right, and then we'll talk about SPX here, and then I'll finish the watch list. So NVIDIA reverse splits 10 for 1. You'll see it trading at 1/10 of its current price on Monday morning. That'll also adjust the options. And one thing to be aware of, typically there is a little bit of selling after a split. Just, a week, maybe 2 weeks. Usually the first month, that stock that split does actually underperform a little bit, but then a year later, it absolutely outperforms. So there is a little bit of, I've got a little bit of a bearish tinge toward NVIDIA next week. One thing that I'm worried about, all right, you heard me talk bonds, you heard me talk NVIDIA. What if NVIDIA starts dropping and bonds start tanking at the same time, let's say out of CPI? What does that do to the market? That's our recipe for SPX to get a serious pullback, the likes of which maybe we saw in an April. June is typically, this period of June is typically a little bit weak anyway. So don't be surprised if we do get a pullback, maybe toward like 5,200, and then some decisions are made, especially if CPI and the Fed don't play ball, which I don't think they will. All right, back to the rest of the stocks I'm watching. I want you to watch Boston Scientific. This is one I'm long. I already bought calls in it. We did it in Delta Strike, and we've seen a lot of bull paper there. It is an interesting one. It looks like it's going to 80. And lastly, Apple. They have their big AI event coming up this week. It's trading 197. What is their AI event going to be? Is it going to blow higher? They are so flat-footed that I worry that if they come up a little short here, it's going to be a problem. All right, so we've hit on bonds, we've hit on the economic events, and my 5 stocks to watch. I've given you levels in SPX and Qs. Lastly, let's end with the VIX. VIX is pretty consistently low. Doesn't even really get a big bid when we do get some selling right now. Part of that's probably a little bit from 0DTE, but primarily it's the fact that the market is really comfortable. You look at VIX futures term structure, they're basically pricing it in to continue to be soft. Now, is that underpriced leading into Wednesday? It might be. By the time we get to Tuesday night, the VIX options are going to be very tightly tied to the cash index. Might be an interesting opportunity for a 1 or 2 day long play on VIX. So, folks, speaking of VIX and volatility, we wrote all about NVIDIA in Option Pit Research. If you're not a subscriber, click in the link and join me in Chicago. You're going to join me, Andrew, Leisha, Frank, and I'm bringing an amazing group of guest speakers and partners like Noel Smith, Russell Rhodes, Mike and Matt Thompson. The list goes on. And of course, Olivia Vaz. We're going to do Trade to Close live there with you. You can click the links here to join me or pick up the phone, call 888-872-3301 or email us support@optionpit.com. Tell them you watched this video and my sales team will have a little discount for you. All right, folks, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. I am Mark Sebastian. I am your only option. Have a good one.